for every American. It is keeping us from fulfilling the promise of liberty and justice for all. And it is holding our nation back from realizing our full potential. We are all a part of George Floyd's legacy, and our job now is to honor it and to honor him. Thank you.
So, when those three guilties were read by the judge, I, like a lot of other people, got somewhat emotional. And actually, I said to myself, if I'm developing a weep today, what must it be like for Black men and Black women who need to regularly offer instructions to their Black sons and grandsons, especially in the United States? I don't know what it's like to be Black, and any person who isn't and pretends to know is lying to themselves or lying to you, because I don't know what it's like to tell a young Black son that I do not have to please be safe, to please take precautions every day because of the color of his skin. To make the presumption that people out there have made an assumption that he's a criminal because of the color of his skin. When I was a child and first paid attention to the world, I thought that by the time I hit, I'd never have to talk about this. I'd never have to think about this. It wouldn't be an issue. I've been wrong about a lot of things in my life.
You thought we'd be
but I've never been more wrong about anything than that.
Driving.
So I don't know how to be Black.
Fords in Cuba, right?
And feel Black.
Right.
And I don't have a Black son.
So.
But thankfully, whatever I have in me has the power to weep for Black moms and dads and grandparents who do their duty every day. But at least on this day, they can also say, justice. Justice. In a moment, Ari Goldkind on the verdict. He's a criminal lawyer. We'll discuss that with him, and then coming up at the bottom of the hour,
but first, 8.5 minutes of commercials.
To some of the important things taking place today in a Canadian life of COVID-19. Thank you so much for joining us. That's Canadian Common Sense in the greatest country on earth. And this is Charles Adler tonight.
Don't miss your daily fix of Canadian Common Sense. Subscribe to the Charles Adler Tonight podcast for free on Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, or wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm Wolfgang Klein, portfolio manager with Canaccord.
So not being able to imagine the reason is one thing, but just imagining if there was people out there that wanted to hurt your kids for no reason, that's just, imagine that, and it's the same thing. My grandmother told me, don't give them an excuse, talking about the cops, don't give them an excuse. That's why you never see me make a sudden move in front of them, do anything to give them any, that's my goal right there. Don't give them an excuse. Let them do whatever the fuck they're going to do to me, but don't give them an excuse. If they're going to shoot me, do whatever they're going to do to me. They're going to have to look like they're doing it when they're doing it. Hey, he's old enough to think of this example. What would you say to your kids in Nazi occupied whatever country? It's the same thing. That part has nothing to do with skin colors. You're gonna kill me, I'm gonna kill you first.
Yeah.
You're gonna kill me, I'm gonna kill you first, so it's okay.
You need to relax, son of a bitch. I don't need no feedback. I'm trying to put my seat back. Don't worry about that other shit. You'll never get it back. Rise like a phoenix from the ashes, like they said I never do. The ones always talking never got a clue. Who the fuck am I? Nah. Who the fuck is you? Riding with my thugs. We just trying to get this money. You can put that on me. We keep the artillery. If they cross me, then it's R.I.P. It's for my real thugs. The ones that squeeze the thorn and bleed just to smell the rosebud. In search of finer things, maybe God will notice me if I blink. That's what it sound like when the pistol sing. Mama checking the obituaries, hoping she don't see me. She cry when they talk about the boy on TV. Wake up some mornings and I don't wanna be me. They say the criminal or gangster is all I ever be. Like there's nothing positive in me. I am positive you're not getting rid of me, at least not that easily. I just wake up and crush the day in the rush to get paid. Tell the devil look away. I got people on my serve on the way. I just wake up and crush the day in the rush to get paid. Tell God to look away. He said, "What do you want to see?" Yeah. I just wake up and crush the day. I just wake up and crush the day in the rush to get paid. Tell the devil he can wait. I got people on my serve on the way. I just wake up and crush the day in the rush to get paid. Tell God to look away. This ain't what he want to see. I just wake up and crush the day. Yeah. This ain't home is where the heart is, but back home I was living heartless. We all hard-headed, trying to prove whose head's the hardest. If thugging wasn't all you can consider me an artiste. Most my friends grew up not knowing who their father is. Nothing in their face, you can see their ribs. Yep, this is how we live. Coming from a place that had nothing left to give, nothing left to take. There's nothing on the plate, but I'm dreaming of a state. Everything is state. I gamble with my life, either 5 stars or behind bars. Lock the jaws, we holding on. Pump up, pass it on, cause I came to what I've been through, ain't what you've been through, but I feel you, yeah, it's true. Everything outside your window waiting to kill you. You think you know, but you ain't got a clue. Hear me, young Sherlock. Ain't no such thing as a search shot. It's a cold block, and I just want what you got.
Cause I'm telling y'all, watch out for sabotage. Pay no attention to the men in the fuck I'm from. Jump sheets when they come through, or they might jump you.
In the rush to get paid, tell the devil he can wait. I got people on my serve on the way. I just wake up and crush the day. In the rush to get paid, tell God to look away. He said, "What do you want to see?" I just wake up and crush the day. I just wake up and crush the day. In the rush to get paid, tell the devil he can wait. I got people on my serve on the way. I just wake up and crush the day. In the rush to get paid, tell God to look away. This ain't what you want to see. I just wake up and crush the day. Yeah.
Fact is, we're not dealing with petty criminals or cheap thugs making a show of their brutality. They have an extreme commitment to their cause. They're willing to do anything, no matter how vicious and underhanded. It's all the same. Anything to attain their ends.
I told the church I need to have it. For that money, that coin, I'm an addict. Still screaming, fuck it, dead homie. So I guess this life is more than just a habit. The day was a good day, but the night comes and watch darkness falls. Up the walls they crawl, demons and all. How I'm living, I'm always involved. My life is one big wrong, never to be solved. I'm walking at a pace to see more like a crawl. But trust there ain't no time to pause. I pulled the weapon out and leave them dead just because. Bro, you care, I keep it extra slow. I'm sick of holding the paper, see you buckets every road.
Oh, here we go. Come on.
Come over the paper, see you fuck yourself in love. You'll be a pretty boy, I can fuck your ass up. I heard the girls like
Classic
fuck the
denial of
all the
service,
rest
you
of
know,
these
but
tattoos. Don't worry, dog, you can have some too. And all your homeboys can have some too. What else can I do? You shooting at me, you shooting at you. It's never over till I say it's so. And even when I say it's over, trust me still, cause my intention's to kill. I let this verse be the evidence to send me to jail. Life is precious and death is divine. They say those that search will eventually find. I think they up their fucking mind, cause I still ain't found mine. And yes, I guess I am a little greedy, taking more than I need from the needy. But believe me, if need be, I do what it takes to get you shit. In critical condition, breathing from an oxygen tank. Ruthless, we're repping central. I'm moving real shit all over this instrumental. Life is simple, just follow the rules and you can't lose. I still suggest you take the time to lace up some shoes.
Every day ain't no other way, slang beat the fucking game, summer way, pushing every day in the night. We in the game, it's the 50 way, where we sick and same way, win the bag, wherever you ride. We from a place where the gifted faith, they get hit from strays and they drift away, be alright. In the guts with the hustle bang, ducking. We happening, back cracks and traffic and navigators can't happen. Stabbing statements, we slapping, we laughing haters, harassing, we talented, we gangsters and gladiators. You just speaking rap, beating on the strip with crack. You on the strip, yeah, but it's for your chips and that. You don't grip scraps, you don't jack shit with gas. You snitch and whack, ain't doing jack
that's
shit.
what I want.
Every day ain't no other way, slang beat the fucking game.
The car company, not Tesla.
We in the game, it's the 50 way, but we sick and same way.
Porsche, there we go. Porsche Gladiator, that's what I want. Bunch of fake Porsches on the front. Spikes coming out of the wheels.
Comprehending sipping, the drops and empty ripping. I see them all for what they were, lies, the pennies missing. These months of envy and the grabbing at my ankles, but I'm hard to catch like jackrabbits on angel dust cops. On my fucking ass and pops off, fucking dash. I spot the walls, my fucking chops off. All over Jack, Dutch's rap. But by the time that chick roach, days slick like ash off the last flip, smoked on. Cold and wet, I brought so many steps off. Lost whatever was left and forgot what I came to get. But I'm a top until I'm set. If the cop fresh, I get. Step in my path and I'ma stomp you on your chest until my pockets are flexed. I'll lock the white bird as long as my hand fucks with that cash. The pipe birds I got feeds, feeding off the chicken scraps. Listen, Jack, flows got your nose to feel like I'm pooping flaps. Well, what can I say? You know I am dog. Shit, I'ma put whatever I get my hands on. Till Bruce fingertips, I flow fluent and thick. Those time MCs, people like they chewing on shit. Who's slipping when they spit? They like a sun. All brewed up, I spit and leave a click, spit like coffee crew cuts. Shit to have you toss the dukes up, this shit's poppin' when we done with your motherfucker. Hung up like Christmas out.
They can all come out and rent the field, they can all go on Oprah tomorrow. They might say, no, we couldn't have cared less. If we thought he was not guilty, you know, we all would have said so. Okay, fine. I'd like to strap them up to a lie detector and cross-examine them. But at the end of the day, one of the most important branches of the U.S. constitutional system, and by the way, ours too, is the separation between the judiciary and politicians. And when you have politicians
it goes back to Magna Charta. That was the word I was trying to remember earlier. Magna
not saying the
Charta
verdict is wrong, but it makes me highly doubtful of the process.
All right, Goldkind.
Habeas corpus to you too.
The audience knows that a court proceeding is not an academic process. It's not moot court at law school.
It's not academic.
It's inside an ecosystem that has to do with years and years and years of a very dark and bleak and wretched history. You can't separate today from all of that.
No, nobody suggests that you should, but that's exactly what comes into play here, which is you can't separate out the racial politics from the charges he was indicted on. Now, you might say that's great. That's making up for time. We in the game, the way, we the same way, in the trial process is that you don't actually look at whether the Minnesota charging statutes were made out. And again, to be clear, I'm not saying they weren't made out. That's not the point of this. But if you can not you, the proverbial you, can seriously say, even if you are celebrating this tonight,
just tell us
that there wasn't greater pressure on this Minnesota jury than on any jury in the history of mankind to come up with one verdict and one verdict only, other than
perhaps the verdict in the OJ trial. That's a different world. This is such a different world.
They didn't come up with that verdict.
That was
Fuck
a not
off,
guilty
man.
verdict.
See?
Nobody rioted. So, you know, at the end of the day, Charles, you can support, again, the proverbial you. I actually think the verdict is justifiable on the evidence that was called. I think this could have gone either way. There are some really interesting issues that you and I probably won't have the time to delve into. But I just don't like when the world sends a message to a jury that you give us the verdict we want despite the facts or the evidence, or we are going to destroy your cities.
All right, Ari, let me just move past that because I've only got a minute and a half left. Could you explain in a minute and a half or less why, without the cell phone video, this trial might not have happened, and certainly you wouldn't have had what you had today?
I'll do my best in 82 seconds, Charles. I really don't think without the video that we'd even have seen a prosecution here. I've talked about for years the importance of body cameras that every officer should wear. I often hear completely stupid arguments against them wearing them, quite frankly, stupid. The footage here, to me, changed everything. Charles, if you even go back to the press release that the Minnesota police put out the night this happened, it was almost describing a totally different event, some benign event where Mr. Floyd just expired. So to me, both as a lawyer and as a person who likes to think there's some Canadian common sense, the prosecution, if I can make the answer simple, said you sat with us for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, don't listen to us, don't listen to the lawyers, trust the 9 minutes and 30 seconds, and as anybody listening to us, Charles, will, I'm sure, agree, it was some of the most telling 9 minutes and 30 seconds that I think we have ever seen.
All right, Goldkind, thank you so much for your knowledge, but most of all, thank you for never giving a damn as to whether or not a particular remark that you're making is going to be popular or unpopular. Appreciate your time as always.
Thank you, Charles.
Ari Goldkind, criminal lawyer and political commentator based in Toronto. So what kind of virus are we actually dealing with these days? Let's talk to a scientist about that. Microbiologist Jason Kendrichuk joins us today to talk about the variants and particularly the double mutant variant in India. This is Charles Adler tonight.
Right, COVID. I forgot COVID. Right. China, Philippines, North Korea, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Russia, Ukraine, Donbass region. Okay. Tigray in Ethiopia. What about all those Bosnians that were starving to death? Lebanon. And then we've had like 4 sham elections this year so far in Africa, to my understanding. I'm gonna fucking die. So maybe I should get one of these new Apple things. Apparently, if I was to die, the camera would tilt down and follow me.
You need to relax, son of a bitch. I don't need no feedback. I'm trying to put my seat back. Don't worry about that other shit. You'll never get it back. Rise like a phoenix from the ashes, like they said I never do. The ones always talking never got a clue. Who the fuck am I now? Who the fuck is you? Riding with my dogs. We just trying to get this money. You can put that on me. We keep the artillery. If they cross me, then it's R.I.P. It's for my real thugs. The ones that squeeze the thorn and bleed just to smell the rose blood. In the search of finer things, maybe God will notice me if I blink. That's what it sound like when the pistols sing. Mama checking the obituary, so she don't see me. She cry when they talk about her boy. I see me wake up some mornings and I don't want a baby. They say the criminal or gangster.
I haven't heard a sign in like 2 hours. That's like a little quiet. All the cops and EMS people are dead.
I just wake up and crush the day in the rush to get paid. Tell the devil he can wait. I got people on my serve on the way. I just wake up and crush the day in the rush to get paid. Tell God to look away. Somebody wanna see it. I just wake up and crush the day. I just wake up and crush the day in the rush to get paid. Tell the devil he can wait. I got people on my serve on the way. I just wake up and cross the day. In the rush to get paid, tell God to look away. This ain't what he wanna see. I just wake up and cross the day. Yeah, they say home is where the heart is, but back home I was living heartless. We all hard-headed, trying to prove whose head's the hardest. If thugging was an art, you could consider me an artiste. Most my friends grew up not knowing who their father is. Nothing in their fridge, you can see their ribs. Yep, this is how we live. Coming from a place that had nothing left to give, nothing left to take. There's nothing on the plate, but I'm dreaming of a state. Everything is state. I gamble with my life, either 5 stars or behind bars. Lock the jaws, we holding on. Pump up, pass it on, cause I came to what I've been doing, what you've been through, what I feel you, yeah, it's true. Everything outside your window waiting to kill you. You think you know, but you ain't got a clue. Hear me, yo, Sherlock. Ain't no such thing as a sure shot. It's a cold block, and I just want what you got. It's real talk. Don't make a scene, just give it up. That's how it is. Where the fuck I'm from? Where the fuck I'm from? Where the fuck I'm from? Yeah. I just wake up and crush the day. In the rush to get paid, tell the devil he can wait. I got people on serve on the way. I just wake up and crush the day. In the rush to get paid, tell God to look away. Somebody wanna see, yeah. I just wake up and crush the day. I just wake up and crush the day. In the rush to get paid, tell the devil he can wait. I got people on my serve on the way. I just wake up and crush the day. In the rush to get paid, tell God to look away. This ain't what you wanna see. I just wake up and crush the day. Yeah.
I need a 1-watt FM transmitter to plug into a cell phone.
Get it, yeah. Yo,
USB or
you need to
something.
relax, son of a bitch. I don't need no feedback. I'm trying to put my seat back. Don't worry about that other shit. You'll never get it back. Rise like a phoenix from the ashes, like they said I never do. The ones always talking never got a clue. Who the fuck am I now? Who the fuck is you? Riding with my dogs. We just trying to get this money. You can put that on me. We keep the artillery. If they cross me, then it's R.I.P. It's for my real thugs. The ones that squeeze the thorn and bleed just to smell the rosebud. In the search of finer things, maybe God will notice me if I blink. That's what it sound like when the pistol sing. Mama checking the obituary, hoping she don't see me. She cry when they talk about her boy on TV. Wake up some mornings and I don't wanna be me. They say the criminal or gangster is all they ever be. Like there's nothing positive in me. I am positive you're not getting rid of me, at least not that easily. I just wake up and crush the day. In the rush to get paid, tell the devil he can wait. I got people on my serve on the way. I just wake up and crush the day. In the rush to get paid, tell God to look away. Somebody wanna see, yeah. I just wake up and crush the day. I just wake up and crush the day. In the rush to get paid, tell the devil he can wait. I got people on my serve on the way. I just wake up and crush the day. In the rush to get paid, tell God to look away. This ain't what you wanna see. I just wake up and crush the day. Yeah, they say home is where the heart is, but back home I was living heartless. We all hard-headed, trying to prove whose head's the hardest. If thugging was an art, you could consider me an artiste. Most my friends grew up not knowing who their father is. Nothing in their fridge, you can see their ribs. Yep, this is how we live. Coming from a place that had nothing left to give, nothing left to take. There's nothing on the plate, but I'm dreaming of a state. Everything is state. I gamble with my life, either 5 stars or behind bars. Lock the jaws, we holding on. Pump up, pass it on, cause I came to what I've been doing, what you've been through, what I feel you, yeah, it's true. Everything outside your window waiting to kill you. You think you know, but you ain't got a clue. Hear me, yo, Sherlock. Ain't no such thing as a sure shot. It's a cold block, and I just want what you got. It's real talk. Don't make a scene, just give it up. That's how it is. Where the fuck I'm from? Where the fuck I'm from? Where the fuck I'm from? Yeah. I just wake up and crush the day. In the rush to get paid, tell the devil he can wait. I got people on my serve on the way. I just wake up and crush the day. In the rush to get paid, tell God to look away. Somebody wanna see, yeah. I just wake up and crush the day. I just wake up and crush the day. In the rush to get paid, tell the devil he can wait. I got people on my serve on the way. I just wake up and crush the day. In the rush to get paid, tell God to look away. This ain't what you wanna see. I just wake up and crush the day. Yeah.
bitch, nigga. Know what it is, B. Check it. Hold the gat down, clap rounds, empty a whole clip. Fuck your squad, hustle hard, empty a whole brick. Fresh out the pen, game tempting the shit. For the paper, take you for a ride, no wrench in the whip. 10 for the hit, and right now that sound like a lot of cake. Apply pressure with the heckler, so they gotta break. Fresh 9-pack with a black yak. Smack cats on the cell block for my Jack Mac. Bitch niggas out, have them cleaning the fish. Work out with the arms and I ain't meaning to dip. Fuck, T-gram stand for what you know is a bird. Snow on the curb, smoke like you blowing the herb. What you know about a trap with a lot of fiends. Figure fuck 357s, watch the Maggie scream. My swag is mean, why you envy me? Madman murder gang, nigga, M3G. I bring hip-hop back, time will tell, so TikTok that. You strong with your break, you baseball bat. All the noise you try to make it, can't take all that. All it takes is a drop of a pin. Then I flip and pull a pin and do some real thing in your whip. Boom, remain a Black Panther, store up a fist, so built to feed. Niggas they caged in, they out of peace. And the block is Emerald City, this shit pretty like New York Street. Sean Bell, police, fuck them. Yo, my people ain't got no love for that. 25, I like too many niggas, just drop it down, damn bad. So orange is on to the next street. Let me sip my last beer on some trap shit. Before I shoot shit on some trap shit. Black cock straps, pop gas, and I'll shoot till I see you fall. He the draw, you can call me if you need a ball. Well, fuck your whole image up as if we can't cards. Madman murder gang, nigga, it's T and bar. Let's forget the gas, it's 2 cats in the matches with open liquor bottles. Blood rolled on pass them. Find the things you ask. Around some, I'll blast them. Trunks where I stash them, yo, it's time for action. Motion picture shit, this is it, no Mike Jackson. Kush getting real, got a rash. I'll kill you for Trey bars, so mind when you pass them. I'm playing with the heat just like my name was Haslam. Carly says my passion, T-Grants my right hand. Both of us with you black, blue, cold like Iceman. The pipes blam and they light like a nightstand. Blam, blam, turn your face cherry like a white man. PC holding up the weight like a bike stand. All bling while you niggas give them kite grams. Got the hammer on the pillows of the nightstand. Kill you in your height, man. Breezy. Switching up the trap house, hustle on the late shift. All through the morning time, trying to stay awake shit. Talking to my homie, laughing what Dave did. Committed suicide, splattered on the pavement. Got a 6-cent humor and a big gun. For the rats, spreading rumors till the pigs come. Know a lot of good people doing like biz. Stuck up in the dark, not knowing where the light is. Sugar turn the shit, love turn the rage. Beating dark liquor, putting slugs in the gauge. Mind on my riches, I'ma do you something bitches do nowadays. Money tell me I'm one of bitches who came to terms with the fact people want me murdered. That's why I got a knapsack full of burners. Shatter pictures, I ain't picking up the pieces. I just leave them in the past, no cash for you. This dude came to terms with the fact people want me murdered. That's why I got a knapsack full of burners. Shatter pictures, I ain't picking up the pieces. I just leave them in the past, no cash for you leeches.
Angry callers, Chuck.
As I say, it's been like this for the last few weeks now in India. As a microbiologist, what are the questions? What are the questions Dr. Jason Kendrick's asking?
The question to me, first and foremost, is how do we get out of this for those people? Certainly we know that this hits areas that are low and middle income or lower socioeconomic status disproportionately. So what do we do to try and turn the tide? The second part is, how do we stop this from happening again? And that to me has been one of the things that we looked at with COVID is certainly we will get through this in North America probably within the next few months with the vaccination program. But we've got to think about these other regions of the world where they are extremely resource strapped, and how do we support efforts to get them through this as quickly as possible? And they're looking for things like oxygen in terms of supplies, the most basic of medical supplies that they need right now.
Saw that earlier today, and I said to myself, "My God, I'm talking about one of the largest populations in the world. They're out of oxygen. I mean, we've got to do an international airlift. I mean, that's what comes to mind. But I still have no idea how easy or difficult that is. I have no idea whether the WHO even thinks about these things? Is this something that you have thought about, that some countries might actually run out of oxygen?
Certainly we've heard of this, right? Even certainly in California and in areas in the U.S. When they were going through kind of the peak of their second wave, we heard of hospitals that were in this kind of a crisis situation. Certainly Brazil, we've heard of definitely the loss of sedatives and drugs. So a lot of people being intubated while they're conscious, just horrible things that have to be done to save lives. The question is, where do you get these supplies from, and who can provide them? We only have a couple of nations that are really doing well with the pandemic in regards to vaccinations, and that being primarily the UK and Israel, with their kind of move back into reopenings. It's tough because I think they're also looking at this and saying we don't necessarily know what is going to happen as we go through these reopenings. So if you want to get supplies out, and you also want to ensure that you have supplies on hand if things start to go south in your own region. It's tough. This is why I think public health people have the worst job and the best job in the world. Is they get to save people when they have the chance, but they have to make these decisions at the worst of times.
So, Dr. Kinderchuk, speaking of supplies, we need to say that we did better in the country today with the numbers of vaccinations that we have done recently, but a lot of that is because the government loosened the regulations about younger people, meaning people over 40, getting AstraZeneca. But there it is, AstraZeneca is being manufactured in India. With all of the cases they've got over there, there's just no way that the suspension isn't going to take place for a while. So we're not expected to get fresh batches of AstraZeneca because they're much needed there. Do you have some thoughts about that?
To do everybody 4 times.
Yeah, I think that this is one of the eventualities that we were always concerned about. Certainly, we've heard an increase in supply for Pfizer, which is going to be good, which will help offset some of that. I'm hoping that with the relaxation on some of the age brackets for AstraZeneca now, that at least we'll get some an additional area of the population vaccinated within Canada. So hopefully that will let us get transmission, under better control than what it has been. But certainly it brings up some questions for the rest of the year. What is this going to look like, and how extended of a forecast do we now have for vaccinations? I think it's a moving target, and I don't think we necessarily have time to think about that right now. It's really how do we get the crisis somewhat under control in India as quickly as possible, because it will have long-term ramifications if we don't.
Dr. Kinderchuk, would we be naive if we thought we could avoid having that same virus that's killing as many Indians as it's killing every single day over there? Would we be naive to think that we're not going to get the same virus here?
I think we would like to be hopeful, but certainly I think that there is naivety in that. The UK has announced, I think, just over 70 cases now. I think that we're doing more genomic surveillance, which will help identify any of this variant as quickly as possible. But certainly it is one of those eventualities, and I think again it comes back to the fact that if we can identify it quick enough, we will be in a good position. But I think we also need to remain hopeful that this variant maybe does not have the properties that we're so concerned that it does.
So,
wait, what?
The planes are still coming into Canada at various airports, including Pearson in Toronto, including YVR in Vancouver, including the Trudeau Airport in Montreal. Can you explain to me why the federal government, I mean, you're in touch with the government, you're a microbiologist, every scientist is in touch with government for various reasons. Can you tell me why the government is so confident that their security measures are so stringent, based on everything you know, so stringent that we can just keep bringing planes in from places like Brazil, India, especially right now? There's far more air traffic from India to Canada than there ever would be from Brazil to Canada because of our population. And maybe the people, of course, who are coming in are Canadian citizens. I'll stipulate all of that. But can you be as confident as the government appears to be that whatever is going on in India is not coming here?
It's a politically correct, non-discriminatory virus.
If I was that confident that I wouldn't have called or at least recommended, trying to be more stringent on international travel during the early part of 2021 when we were concerned about B117. And the other two variants coming into Canada. There were quite a few of us that went forward and said we need to be very concerned about this and certainly need to be considering restricting international travel into Canada. So I think that I like to be optimistic at the best of times. I'm concerned because of the fact that we weren't able to already do this when we knew that these three variants were moving through populations. Now we see a massive outbreak with a variant that we don't know much about. How easily are we going to be able to track that in time? And obviously with the variants that we have in Canada, we've seen how quickly they spread. So again, it's going to be very, very difficult to try and keep this out. I think our best hope right now is if they're not going to restrict travel, then we better hope that our surveillance efforts are as top notch and running as smoothly as possible.
We're going to continue this conversation in just a few moments. If you have a question or comment for Dr. Jason Kindersick, microbiologist based in Saskatchewan and Manitoba, here's our number 1-877-399-9898, toll free 1-877-399-9898. And if you're texting, please give us your first name and location. Charles Adler with Jason Kindersick, back in a moment on Charles Adler tonight.
Laid off due to COVID-19? You are entitled to full severance pay if you're not recalled to work by your employer. Over 90% of employees are offered much less than they're actually owed. Get the compensation you need. Go to employmentlawyer.ca.
Man, if I was in a RAV4.
Yeah, Eastside, GSC, M3, Gully Side veterans, Gully Side veteran, Gully Side veteran. Gully Side veteran, niggas know who we better than. Club night and deep, stick the knife in the metal in. Gully Side veteran, M3 GS, the Gully Side veterans. They wanna lock us down for extended periods of time. You can catch my body, but never change my mind. I want my money up front, no half shit. Smoke a blunt to the end, leave the ashes. Back to the store, cup of Henny, need it backwards, crack a 40.
Let's take that slow down, hit the block, still waiting.
Driving slow as fuck before my young boys get you. Hope the Lord will run upon me. Yeah, that's war, full combat and all that. Then you fall back out here with some real niggas. Call it blood hunt, you can get killed, nigga. But we good cause you ain't doing good at my hood. It's what the hood want. You can work harder, but good isn't good enough. You used to roll dice for high stakes and stick it up. Head home, fat pocket stick, getting cooking up. Gully Side veteran, niggas know who we better than. Club night and deep, stick the knife in the metal in. Gully Side veteran, M3 GS, them Gully Side veterans. Gully Side veteran, niggas know who we better than. Club night and deep, stick the knife in the metal in. Gully Side veteran, East side nigga, we the Gully Side veteran. I still bombing this bitch, bro, shit up like landmines. I'm on the page, niggas for holding the wrong gang sign. Regular shit turn ugly, rugged niggas move monkey. Trace specs boxy, don't try to get lucky. Made man in this bitch, who's your family name if you touch me? Dead weight, never, we pull weight like huskies. Rappers, they rap into this and the that. Say they live the trap life and hold clip for the cat. But it's shot for shot, tip, my nigga tip for the tat. Robbing for his chain, there ain't no giving it back. Just say calm down, like why didn't he snap? But didn't he snap? I roll up punches and dabs. Fuck that, pump, take your punch and hug that. Tired of niggas talking about drugs and gun raps. They get a pass if they win and they thug that. They lie about the Benz, but they walk with a bus pass. Saying they have it up, but when I see them, I cut grass. Could've been more if a nigga didn't cut class. I done got rushed, but my niggas are rushed back. Phone call from banks like nigga, we crushed that. Gully Side veteran, niggas know who we better than. Club night, 10 deep, stick the knife in the metal in. Gully Side veteran, M3 GS, them Gully Side veterans.
Gully Side veteran, Gully Side veteran. Me and my bitch like John F. Kennedy, Maryland. We still selling that white power, we call it arrogance. I'm like a surrogate, when I carry in a straight bars, MDG. I'm in a strategy, playing good Samaritan, listening to Barrington. We don't respect nobody, like an American. Talk like you want, my niggas have never heard him. Nope. Throwing up signs like a deaf guy. Make him crash your truck like left eye. Niggas had their chance, well maybe next time. How you get that shot charge? Didn't get time. I was locked up doing dead time. Now I'm free as a bird, it's like a jet flying. You need medication, but I got medicine. This shit hit like an earthquake when it level him. No some real bad boy, what's the Eglinton? That's SICKLY. One time again, I'm a side veteran.
Niggas know who we better than. Club night, 10 deep, stick the knife in the meddling. Gully side veteran, M3 GS, them gully side veterans.
Hit the thumbs now.
Yeah. Eastside, GSC, M3. Gully side veteran, gully side veterans. Gully side veterans, gully side veterans. Gully side veteran, niggas know who we better than. Club night, 10 deep, stick the knife in the meddling. Gully side veteran, M3 GS, them gully side veterans.
Gully side veteran. Me and my bitch like John F. Kennedy, Maryland. We still selling that white power, we call it arrogance. I'm like, when I'm carrying a tray bar, MDG, I'm in a strategy. Playing good Samaritan, listening to Barrington. Winner respect, nobody like an American. Talk like a what, my niggas just never hearing him. Nope. Throwing up signs like a deaf guy. Make them crash the truck like left eye. Niggas had their chance, well maybe next time. How you get that shot charge? Didn't get time. I was locked up doing dead time. Now I'm free as a bird, it's like a jet flying. You need medication, but I got medicine. This shit hit like an earthquake when it level him. No some real bad boy, what's the Eglinton? And some real white boys, what's the Fredericton? Mama Shackleton, bringing up the Remington. Bunch of fake niggas fighting like wrestling. Blood clot. I'm a gully side veteran, nothing like a rookie. Them boys can't handle my work. It's like cookie, still like cookie. Red eye in your face, black and blue like Tookie. My thing clap it dark since I left Trippz. Better ask about Charlie, he got mad juppies. Like Sierra got goodies, bullets all stubbies. Walking through the streets of my trade, found hoodie. I'm a gully side veteran.
Niggas know who we better than. Club night, 10 deep, stick the knife in the meddling. Gully side veteran, M3 GS, them gully side veterans. Gully side veteran, niggas know who we better than. Club night, 10 deep, stick the knife in the meddling. Gully side veteran, niggas know who we better than. Club night, 10 deep, stick the knife in the meddling.
I double up, set your bitch like I was traveling. Couldn't say both if you brought 007 and you couldn't light shit up. If you were Thomas Edison and all these MCs just suck, there's no comparison. No, can't see these niggas, I'm like a blind guy. Nobody cares since I drop like cry. When I say I'm connected, there's no Wi-Fi. When I walk in the building, it's like sci-fi. I'm the best in this bitch, nigga, like white light. Butty boy, I started with time shy. You need a hookup, baby girl, I got all of that. Fucking right in the pussy and make a holler back. Charlie boy, here ain't nothing to care some. Since a young boy, I ain't gon' chill button. Boy, stab me up, I ain't feel nothing. 13 stabs and it's still nothing. Drake's best and Jay Banco, they got an angle. I bought 18 white bitches to send the banquet. New leather clutch and the suede and the kangaroo. If you that L shit, niggas better be thankful.
Gully side veteran, niggas know who we better than. Club night, 10 deep, stick the knife in the meddling. Gully side veteran, M3 GS, them gully side veterans. Gully side veteran, niggas know who we better than. Club night, 10 deep, stick the knife in the meddling. Gully side veteran, niggas know who we better than. Club night, 10 deep, stick the knife in the meddling.
Oh, we're gonna miss angry callers. Hold on. Angry callers, Chuck. So I think for a year now, I've been hearing these people tell us that they don't know what to do it and what to do, and they're not going to do it.
Full protection, full efficacy for that vaccine. it's going to be after that second dose, and again, usually a time lag of about a week to 10 days post second dose until you actually have that full
like 6 months they test.
We have to be cautious with that, right? This isn't 100% protection. We have seen people that have gotten infected, although at a very low rate, but there is that potential. So people still have to be cautious. They certainly aren't necessarily bulletproof.
Another Mary, this one in a different part of the country, Vancouver Island. Mary, you're on with Dr. Jason Kinderchuk. Welcome.
I hope this is appropriate for you, Dr. Kinderchuk. And by the way, you don't sound as optimistic tonight as you usually sound. What is it about COVID that makes it so hard to breathe?
Breathe. Is it so hard to breathe?
Yes.
So the issue with COVID is that it's infecting the respiratory tract cells, right? So the problem with it is you have two things going on. You have the virus that's creating more copies of itself, which means that basically those new virus particles are then going out to other cells and infecting them. But what happens is that those cells are also now trying to mount an immune response, because that's what our cells do. They respond to changes in the environment around them. And what we get is basically the strong immune response to the virus, which if it kind of hits a nice threshold and gets rid of the virus, that's okay. If it goes above that threshold and provides too much inflammation, then we start seeing the problems in regards to things like respiration and alteration in how the cells work. So it's always a balancing act, and that's why I'm not smart enough to be an immunologist, because immunology is really difficult, and understanding this is extremely, extremely difficult.
Thank you very much, Mary. I'm not suggesting there's a magic bullet to bring the counts down in Ontario, but is there one thing that you could recommend as a public health person, as a microbiologist, because you've got a way of doing exactly what you've been trained for. You focus on the virus, not the politics, and not the spin. What could be done in Ontario right now, where we've got a very dramatic situation, to bring down the counts? If you could give me that, Dr. Kinderchuk, in 40 seconds or less, that'd be wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, first and foremost, we have to get people vaccinated. That's the most important thing, because we know people are still ending up in the hospital. And with that, we need to also have people that still take those infection prevention control measures seriously. So distancing and masking are more important than they probably have been throughout the entire pandemic there right now. So it's basically a 1-2 punch of both the vaccine and those different measures.
And of course, Peel made a decision today, and Peel involves, of course, Caledon, Mississauga, Brampton. So it's a huge swath of territory just west of the city of Toronto. And today they said if there are more than 5 cases in any business of COVID-19, that business is going to shut down, have to shut down for a while. That's something public health people have been saying for a long time. Essential workers working in close quarters, spreading COVID. It's time to try to do something about that. And of course, some of that is also going to be discussed tomorrow. I'm expecting an announcement from the provincial government in Ontario on mandatory SICKLY, which is
well, I'm going to hit pause and stop. Or not. Start something. Oh, today was good. This is the silence plus the clicking of that mic. I don't know what makes that click exactly. There's no particular reason it should do that. And some tells me what you fucking headphones. Some tells me if I got a better mic or a better camera, I would just have a higher definition clicking noise. It seems to be how things are going right now. I don't know how that came up on this search.
Arrangements are being made for a public funeral ceremony on Saturday.
There's something that's never gonna happen again.
See what happens when you run your mouth. See what happens when you run your mouth.
You better lay down. You don't wanna die. Just give it up, man. You don't wanna die. You better lay down. You don't wanna die. Just give it up, man. You don't wanna die.
Yeah, you look empty and cold, addicted to gold. Look that life like anything could be sold. The tragic story told, but behold, a child on his own, alone with nothing but his thoughts and his plan to get him home. In these wastelands we roam, a soldier with a cell phone in the pocket full of pieces. I'm a slime till it all falls to pieces. Father, forgive me, for I am a sinner. I know all too well what I do, but that's enough talking to you. I got chops to attend to my lifestyle. Got me picking the windows open and I'm ready to shoot you. I don't know no man to be bulletproof, but I do know killers that got shit to prove. And sometimes I'm feeling out of control. I wanna take a shotgun and unload. And I know it don't take much to make these fake fucks fold. So tuck your chain and get rolled. Cause around here there's certain places you can't go. And now that you're here, just do what you're told. If you lay down, you might be let go.
You better lay down. You don't wanna die. Just give it up, man. You don't wanna die. You better lay down. You don't wanna die. Just give it up, man. You don't wanna die.
Yeah. Fucking lunatics to show you how to rule against flow. Booty is up, but I can shoot and I intrude in your home. We tripping you and your go, using aluminum chrome. I let the roof go and love do and reload. We shooting you and your whole clique cause your crew is a joke. Release and loose and explode. Let fucking crew will get smoked. Fuck off the tomb with your dome. Go see your tomb with a phone. Go see your crew was done and shooting at the funeral home. And folks ain't doing nothing new, they got a truth to be told. Who really know? It's just like the son of Bruce and the Crow. Fuck with my homies, I ain't shooting you, it's gruesome and slow. The only way you eating food is through a tube in your throat. Attaching them to with the boots and on the loose to your choke. I'm liquid flipping, sipping fluids in the tomb of your world. And you gon' make it up to heaven's gate is loose in the go. My bullets send you down to Hades in a Lucifer's road. Nobody really give a fuck cause you was doomed from the go. Wishing the lift ain't coming to when you still losing your soul. And you inducing and producing, just abusing the code. I'm prostitutes of God don't look like pharmaceuticals though. I'm like the douche with no bacon soul to turn into stone. All the hookers getting cracked like computer to go. And sucking dick with dogs, smoking what's consuming they soul. It's beautiful but cold like a rusty roof in the snow. No I'm losing, no my fuse is lit as soon as we explode. I'm twisted sicker than a schizo that got bit by Cujo. Snort some shit that you know. I'm putting you in the zone. The 22 is getting loosened like the screws in my dome. You suckers.
Just give it up, man. You don't wanna die. You better lay down. You don't wanna die. Just give it up, man. You don't wanna die.
There's no place like home. But if anything were to happen to it, there's no place like Intact Insurance.
The problem is that means that